Welcome to the Post-Pandemic Freedom Show brought to you by Bold Molders. Today, I'm Dr. Wayne Buchanan, like most days, and this is my friend Joshua Shafran.
Like most days, also. Although sometimes I feel like Wayne.
We've been talking about the success seesaw, and we got to this interesting statement of motivation sucks. So, do you mind if I do my check-in and make sure that I actually have, quiz myself on all this stuff
Sure.
that we've done so far?
Do you want me
All
to
right,
bring
can you throw
slides
those
up, or
slides?
how do you want to
Yeah,
do that? Okay.
please. Yeah. So, I know we're getting to motivation sucks. Let's do the recap to get there because I know that that's part of, important to know that here's how we got to this lovely statement because nobody's going to just buy that statement as it sits. So, I know we've got the
Do you want me
recap.
to
So,
scroll
next
down,
slide?
or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's
Okay.
scroll on through there. I know we've been talking about entering the mastery zone from the context of the zero factor. We don't want either the inner game or the outer game to be zero because when we multiply them together, we get a big fat goose egg. So we talked briefly about the tool that you suggest for the outer game, WMN Compass. We talked about this seesaw as the inner game tool that, by the way, also covers inner game. Nice. Um, Let's see, what else? You showed the next slide, so I got a hint. That's where we're going next, is let's go look at the seesaw. Yeah, that's what I said already. Good. Okay. This, in case folks don't know, this whole idea of, can I reconstruct this argument? Can I come up with these ideas? Can I follow the flow? Is a great way to test your mastery of the content, but also that struggle to go, okay, wait, what was next is actually part of the learning process and is really helpful. So if you're not playing along at home, pause and play along. So we talked about the fulcrum, tune, look, see, and the idea that that's the direction we want to build this is start with tuning into who it is that we would have to be in order for that evidence to start showing up and getting the results that we really want and not try the other way around and say, those are the results I want. These are the things I got to do. And then maybe I'll become that person who could do that because we know how rarely that happens. Okay.
So, up, not down.
Yes. Okay. Because it's really hard to build a pyramid from the top down, right? That
I would assume so, yes.
I'm picturing all the scaffolding that would be required. That would be horrific. All right. And we talked about this idea of when our seesaw top is sitting there and it's balanced, we can, we can do the thing, we can test, and it doesn't take a whole lot to make things shift. And the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5s, I'm trying not to look at the bottom, but I already did. So ones are the passing thoughts. And then if we let those become habitual thoughts, then they can turn into beliefs, turn into core beliefs, turn into expectation or facts or that reality that we allow ourselves to live in.
Right.
And I see that we've got them going both directions because if you either towards the side you do or don't want, the more that things build up, the more stuff that's happening there. And last time we ended with the idea that if we push down on the side we want, our default as overachievers and we want to go out and do big things. So we're going to use all that motivation to push down on that side. That's where we ended with the premise of motivation sucks. So then I think our next slide is showing, okay, great. I got the thing I wanted with motivation. And that's what everybody pictures happening, right? We're just going to push down that side. We're going to use our motivation. We're going to get the stuff we want on that
We're going to use
side.
all of our grit and determination and hard work ethic and force and just make it happen, right? Which is great.
Yes. And in an ideal world, we wouldn't even need a whole lot of it. We would just push down gently and it would go down on that side, right?
Yeah,
As a kid,
anything that
I
we want.
remember going out there and going, all right, I'm going to put this end on the ground. And even as a little kid, you could grab it. And if you had to, you walked from the middle of the seesaw and walked out. And guess what? Down goes that end. Awesome. However, I think our next point is that's assuming that it's balanced, and it's not, is it? That's why I think that's why I think you're saying that motivation sucks.
Well, what ends up happening is that our unconscious conditioning and all of our past stacks up. And on different subjects, we have different expectations and we have different things that we believe are possible for us based upon all the things that we've been discussing up till now. And if you've been playing along, and I hope that you are, you've gotten some real insights into your own way of approaching this. But what ends up happening is that we've got stuff on subjects that are weighing us down based on our past. And the past stacks up, and but because we're not consciously thinking about it, we're not consciously aware of it, what ends up happening is that we think it doesn't exist. So we think what we've got is just a free flowing seesaw like this, where we can touch down on any side and that there's nothing weighting us down. But in fact, unconsciously, there's a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of our past unconscious conditioning that is weighing us down and keeping it on certain subjects firmly rooted in the unwanted. So what ends up happening is that we've got to overcome, we've got to use force, we've got to rely on motivation to overcome so much. And the instant that this teeters, and notice that this is kind of teetering on purpose, is that the instant that this lets up, because you can't run all out in all directions, then this takes over and we have the snapback loop, which is boom, crush. Now you're in firmly rooted in what you don't want to have happen, even though you are aware of the tune look see process consciously. But what you're doing is you're using force. You're using a collector's mentality to force the seesaw down, and you're trying to ignore the weight on the other end and just, all right, well, I'll just, if something's pushing back, I'll push back twice as hard. And that will work until it doesn't anymore. And that's where burnout comes from. That's where unhappiness, that's where depression, anxiety, all of those things happen because of that energy that you're fighting against it.
I have this mental picture of a bunch of fourth graders pulling down on that right hand side. Like I'm sitting on the seesaw as a fourth grader, and there's Fred, that bully sixth grader, sitting on the other end of the seesaw. But all my
Right?
friends are helping, and we're piling on, and we got enough. We touched down, but as soon as we did, as soon as somebody lets up, guess what? I'm gonna go flying and end up with splinters in my backside.
Right, right. It's like here's your 6-year-old bully or whatever that's sitting on that, and here's you up here just dangling. Help me, help me, help me. The point is that this is in control of the results that you see. Now, there's something that you should be aware of, and that's on other subjects. It's exactly the opposite, where it's firmly rooted, and you've got this without the motivation. You could
Yeah.
take this off. So take the motivation off the equation here, and there's things where you've got the exact opposite, where you're rooted on a subject matter where it's absolutely a foregone conclusion. Nobody can tell you that you can't write a JavaScript script code for something, right? I mean, like, you got this, you can figure it out. Maybe there's some challenges that you've got to map out, but there's no question, there's no uncertainty in the mix. It's done, and you will get the result eventually that you want to get based upon that.
And I love that in those cases, it's not I don't need motivation. It's just, okay, yeah, I'm going to get it done. So it's not this picture because I don't need to pile all my friends on and pull down that side of the seesaw.
Right.
It just, I do it. It's what I do, right? I solve technical problems. It happens. It's
It
not a
doesn't
big deal.
require any motivation because there's zero uncertainty that you can get the result and the outcome that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Motivation implies that it's outside of you. That motivation implies that you need something beyond your capabilities to get the results that you want to get and that you want to have happen. The way that I think about motivation is motives for the actions that we take. And if you're looking for motives to take a specific action, it's always outside yourself. It's always somebody else or something else that's outside of us that's giving us that motive, that reason why we're taking the action that we're taking.
Yeah, I've definitely had to wrestle with that because I know you've said this motivation sucks in the past, and I've wrestled with because that's what I do, obviously. If you haven't seen enough episodes to hear me do it on screen, like, is that true?
Well,
How does that work?
I mean, you're
But
being a critical thinker and you're pushing back if you're not just agreeing outright. And that's how and that's how I'm going to grow too. Because if I can't hold up to the pushback, then I must have some work to do.
yeah, and so far I haven't hit any points, but it's always okay, how do I reconcile this with what I already know? So, are there Fred stories I have to bump to make this actually palatable for my psyche?
See, for me, the replacement is inspiration versus motivation. Inspiration
Yeah.
comes from within. It's power
Yep.
versus force. Motivation to me
And
is force. I've got to force it, beat it up, and I've got to look for the next technique, the next hack, the next breakthrough that may or may not work for a limited period of time, or the next strategy. But it's something outside of myself
Mhm.
that's gonna create the results that I want to create, rather than saying, "Hey, wait a minute, how do I expand who I am and use inspiration to then move forward?" And inspired action never requires force. It's a million times more powerful than motivated action or forced action. So whatever you call it doesn't matter. Get the feeling behind it and connect with the that, and you'll get the heart space that I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I know you accidentally slid to the next slide, which has all of that there. I actually hit as I was wrestling with it however many weeks ago, the idea of, okay, if motivation's external, what's the internal equivalent? And I came up with engagement, but maybe that's because of my background. But I'm going, does that still work? Engagement, all right,
Well,
does
explain to me
engagement
what you mean by
inspire?
engagement. So help me understand that
Yeah.
symbol to you.
Yeah, coming at it from the idea of if I need to have this external motivation versus what's the internal thing that gets me going. It's, oh, I'm engaged with this subject, with this task, with what the outcome that I'm going after. But engagement for me is something that has to come from the inside, even if it's prompted by the
I
outside.
was
Like
just gonna say you took the words right out of my mouth, because you can't have engagement if you didn't decide to be
Mhm,
engaged. And what does it mean?
exactly.
When I was in college and in trade school, in between high school and college, the way that I had to learn because of my learning disabilities was I had to see, how does this make sense to me? Like, how does this apply, this theory? How does this apply in my life in this situation? And I would play a game. I couldn't stop studying until I saw it in operation in my life. But that's internal. That's in
Mhm.
spirit. That's in inner. It wasn't because I needed to pass the test that I was studying this stuff, because that's just rote memorization. That never worked for me, and I could never do that. But once I applied it to a particular situation in my life, then you could ask the question in 100 different ways, and it wouldn't stump me, because it I figured out how it made sense inside of my life and how it would apply to a particular situation. Whether it was in my finance and insurance and future value of money training programs in college, or whether that was
Mhm.
learning about airfoils in trade school. The same thing, like I had to figure out how to make it make sense, but that was an internally driven thing, like you just said.
Yeah, and the whole Mark Twain quote about "I never let schooling get in the way of my education." Like, yeah, we need to know why we're learning something rather than. Anyway, that's a whole nother rant that we'll leave
Yeah,
for a
we could
different
go
day.
into a
But
different.
circling back to this idea of engagement, inspiration, I wonder if they are similar, just different facets on the same gem. Like these are different ways, but they're all, whichever one works in the moment for you to own and step into and say, okay, but this is internally driven.
Well,
as
and
opposed to
again,
external.
don't get caught up on the labels because that can become an excuse to stay hiding out and playing a smaller game. It, it, I know I did this for a long time. Let me figure this out. Why? What does he mean by this label? I can't move on until I have this figured out. Until I figured this all out. And it took me a long time to realize that was my way of hiding. That was my way of not facing the stuff that I really wanted to do. And I saw it show up in so many different areas, even after I became quote unquote super successful. It was an excuse to continue chasing my tail and stay within the zone of comfort or the zone of familiar where I didn't have to venture too far into the known unknowns, and I definitely didn't have to risk going out on the skinny branches of the stuff that I don't even know that I don't know, because that's whoa. And I had defined that as being like, if I don't know something and I admit to that, then I'm weak, I'm stupid, I must be a complete loser. And like I can't.
Those are some gross left-hand side feelings.
Yep, yep. But that was the stories that were running me for sure,
Hmm.
on particular subjects. So that ended up motivating me to never shut up, to to never admit to being wrong, to never apologizing, all the typical stuff that ends up happening when you get attached to it looking a certain way. And it was
Yeah.
because it was
So,
for me fearful.
so what's one thing people can do today to shift from that motivation external side to the inspiration or engagement internal side?
Where people can spend some time focused on this is start to think about areas of your life, like in that the pandemic maybe brought to your attention, where you used to be able to create results without a lot of effort, without a lot of force, and now all of a sudden to create the similar results or even lesser results, you have to work really hard at it and force it, and it feels like it's lasting less time and you're not enjoying it, and at the same time you're burning yourself out. So as part of a practical what to do is look for the areas that you feel burned out, that you feel frustrated, that you're not getting the results, that you've been working legitimately hard to get those results and it just isn't working. And or it works for a very limited period of time before the snapback. And just evaluate it, look at it, put on your white lab coat, pretend you're a scientist, and just look at it, observe it from above as though you don't have any attachment to how it looks, as though it doesn't define you in any way, shape, or form. What happened? It says nothing about you as a person or as anything else. It just is something that is, and just observe it from that level, and just notice it. And then when any type of an emotion comes up that gets triggered or whatever, just say, "Huh, yeah, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that that's what ended up happening?" And you'll start to be able to unwind it in terms of the tune, look, see process, and be able to go play the tape backwards and say, all right, well, I was seeing this result and I didn't like the results that I was seeing and it was burning out, which must have meant that I was looking for this types of things and this evidence or whatever. And well, then evidently I was I was filtering in this area, and that wasn't serving me. So now I can, and then play the tape backwards. So that's what I would recommend in terms of that. Would you augment that in any way?
I just love that no matter how far down the path you are, the iron sharpens iron, that like, oh yeah, there's a thing. I had one come up while we were chatting. Like, good, got it. We'll unpack that later, but tag that for later. But yeah, just that, okay. Even when you're, 15, 20, 35 years into this process of unpacking your stuff, there's
Well, and
still
again, the
moments of, oh yeah, good.
stuff is just unconscious conditioning.
Nope.
And the reason why you're unpacking it is because it is invisible. It is that invisible operating system that now you're making visible. And guess what? The instant that you make it visible, it's no longer unconscious.
Yep.
And it's really kind of simple. It's so simple, we make it complicated.
So, what other simple things should folks do between now and next episode?
Well, I hope that you're
Pandemic.
using Wayne's post-pandemic abundance playbook as the kind of the guide to follow along with each of these episodes, so that you can use it as the exercises in there, because it does apply. Even though he's not rewriting the 28 pages each time, it applies evenly to all of the different things that we're doing here. And you will get a new sense, a new experience of it, and be able to go from the general that we talk about here to the specific as it applies and needs to be implemented in your specific life and situation, so that it will work given what your goals and desires are, and given where you are right now and what your background is. So, it's kind of a unique report in that it molds to you and grows with you as you expand and grow and move into different levels of post-pandemic freedom and abundance. And the way to get that report, if you don't already have it, is you can go to postpandemicabundance.com, and that will be the direct link that will redirect you over to Gumroad, where you can download it for free and enjoy it, print it out, and away we go. So that's what I would recommend.
Sounds good. Until next time.